Dave, welcome to Double Coverage Radio. It's Tuesday, July 7th, 2020. Can you believe it's already July, Dave? Where are we remote and live on assignment tonight?
I cannot believe it's July already, almost double digits of July. I am sitting in Coconut Creek, Florida this week. So that's where I'm at right now on assignment following the Coconut Creek Mud Hens of the minor league baseball. Actually, I don't know if they exist, but I am in Coconut Creek, Florida, which is near Fort Lauderdale.
Near Fort Lauderdale. What airport did you fly into? Did you fly into a regional airport or did you fly into Orlando and take a rental car?
Fort Lauderdale, flew right in from Appleton, Wisconsin to Fort Lauderdale with a puddle jump to Chicago in between.
Outstanding. Well, it's great to have you on board tonight. We are Double Coverage Radio, and we are sponsored by Hanson Screen Printing, located in Elkhorn, Wisconsin. For all your screen printing and embroidery needs, check them out on the World Wide Web at hansonscreenprinting.com. Dave, let's go ahead and get this show started. We have a lot to talk about tonight as it pertains to the current state of the NFL. We definitely need to talk a little bit about one of the most important stories that's currently cycling through the news circuit with regard to a certain quarterback from an AFC West team based in Kansas City, Patrick Mahomes, who was the $500 million man. Wow, I saw that news story break yesterday from Pro Football Talk. What are your thoughts just looking at the pure numbers? I know we're not going to really see the gist of the contract until we take a look at the breakdown of the contract in terms of the languages, right? But if you're Patrick Mahomes, and we'll get into this a little bit more in detail, how stoked are you to command a salary that could potentially buy any pro sports team he wants when he retires?
Yeah, I think it's a crazy, insane contract for any of us regular people to try to wrap our heads around how much money he was just guaranteed in his life for the next 10 years. It's almost impossible. I've seen some graphics about he's going to make over $1 a second. So if he drops $1 on the floor, it's not worth his time to bend over and pick it up because he'll make $2 more before he gets it back in his pocket.
It's like me and you dropping a quarter on the ground. It's
like me dropping paper money from Monopoly. It's really what it is, right? I think a couple of cool things about it. I think the first coolest thing is Adam Schefter was the first person to kind of drop the stuff on Twitter, but actually somebody who works at a liquor store across the street from Arrowhead Stadium was the first person to drop the knowledge that Patrick Mahomes got a new contract because a bunch of executives came in looking for champagne to take back to the Kansas City Chiefs office, and she tweeted, "I'm pretty sure that Patrick Mahomes just got his new contract." She didn't have specifics, but she was the first one to tweet it. So that's pretty cool. Social media and Twitter and stuff has put things like that in the hands of average everyday people. So pretty cool in that aspect. And then as we've gotten more knowledge here in the last 24 hours of what the contract's like, it's just overwhelmingly insane. $503 million, 477 guaranteed. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's interesting. I took a look at the numbers in terms of the actual breakdown of the actual stats as it pertains to the year-over-year value. He's only got a signing bonus of 10.5 million. He was slated to make 27.5 next year. He's only slated to see potentially 90 million over the first 3.5 years, 4 years of the deal. Then it ostensibly, right, Dave, becomes a series of one-year contracts going year to year. With that being said, what's the likelihood of Mahomes throwing passes for the Chiefs in 2031, 32, and 33?
Yeah, I think it's very unique because it's a 10-year contract, but it's being added after his next 2 years. So really, he's with the Chiefs for 12 more seasons, right? The fact that 477 million is guaranteed means that although they are one-year contracts, the Chiefs are going to be on the hook for this guy, paying him for the duration of the next 10 years. I'm sure it was wishful cap management to kind of put it more on the back end when they assume that the salary cap will be a larger amount and that the 40, 50, 60 million dollars they'll be paying Mahomes per year will be a better percentage of the cap than pay him that kind of money now. So what I think it does is very often you see the Patriots are really the only team that's been able to maintain a dynasty in the last, since the Dallas Cowboys, right? You see teams be
Yeah.
good for a year or two, and as they get good, guys are up for new contracts, and then that kind of blows up the salary cap, right? You can't keep all these great players that you won a Super Bowl, or maybe someone like the Packers in the mid '90s, you won one, then you lost one, and you can't keep all those guys. But the way this is structured, they got Mahomes on a rookie deal for the next 2 years. And then the first 3 to 4 years of the next contract are still things that will allow them to continue to put pieces around him. So I think if you watch the video that Patrick Mahomes put out on his Twitter and Instagram and stuff, it's talking about trying to build a dynasty. So this was a great way for Mahomes to get what he deserved for the market and what he's earned in his first few years in the league, but also give the Chiefs the flexibility to sign other guys to make sure that they have the pieces around him to stay Super Bowl contenders for the next at least 5 to 8 years.
Yeah, isn't that the goal, Dave, to win a championship or compete and build the foundation of your team with a player that's on his first contract? You talk about Jared Goff, who made a Super Bowl appearance for the LA Rams. You talk about Patrick Mahomes, who won a Super Bowl. Here's an interesting statistic for the quarterbacks the last 5 seasons that have signed what would equate to a supermax deal: Ben Roethlisberger, Russell Wilson, Matt Stafford, Matt Ryan, and Aaron Rodgers. Exactly zero have won a Super Bowl since signing the contract. Some would argue, right, that part of that is related to the ability of those teams to retain talent around them. When you're playing a player, 1/4 or 1/5, 1/6 of the salary cap, and there's not prorated protection for those other players, there's a pretty hefty investment there. So on paper, it looks like it's a lucrative deal for Mahomes. But here's the thing: did he sacrifice leverage by accepting a deal this soon into his first contract? Because technically, you've got 2 more years, and you're going to see a little bit more money up front in the first 4 years. But wouldn't you want to pursue it like, let's treat it like a 4 to 5 year deal, get as much money as we can, maybe get franchise tag and get a 35 to 40% raise every season, ostensibly beyond whatever it is when you first sign? Or what's the value there?
I think there's definitely a lot of unknowns for Mahomes, his camp, for the NFL, for Dak Prescott and Deshaun Watson, who are sitting here looking for deals as well. But I think what Patrick Mahomes did, he's getting a ton of money, right? $477 million he's going to have in his bank account between now and the next 10 years or the next 12 years, right? So it's not like he took a really big hometown discount. It may end up being a hometown discount when he's 6, 7 years into this. Maybe the going rate for an NFL quarterback is $70 million a year. As crazy as that sounds, I saw a stat. Patrick Mahomes' dad was a long time, played 12 years in Major League Baseball in the '90s, and he made throughout his whole contract a little over $2 million in all of his contracts. And he wasn't an all-star, he wasn't a starter, he was a bullpen guy, but he played for 12 years in the majors, and he made a little over $2 million. You look at some of the contracts of guys in the '90s, and you compare it to now, 20 years
Yeah.
ago, 30 years ago, it's insane. So yes, maybe Patrick Mahomes sacrificed some money down the road, but I think he was able to, he's talked about wanting to be in Kansas City, talked about wanting to build championship contenders and dynasties. And, the same thing Tom Brady did with the Patriots for a long time is he took a kind of what's going to probably all end up looking like a hometown discount to make sure that Kansas City is able to surround him with the kind of players that allow them to continue to be Super Bowl contenders year in and year out while he's the quarterback.
Yeah, I think you're definitely spot on in your assessment with that. Here's the thing: Kansas City's not going to be hurting for the next couple of years because this deal doesn't really ostensibly start until 2022, right? So they've got $34.5 million they're going to pay him up front to the next couple of seasons. They gave him $10.5 million in a signing bonus. It's guaranteed for injury up to 140 million plus, which is not a bad deal. If for some reason something were to happen with him and he were able to not return to form or have some sort of a health or injury related issue, he's pretty much set for life. He can take care of his family and do what he needs to do. It's just interesting to me, the dynamic now in terms of being able to really set the market, right? We talk about what that is like for certain players when you get to the echelon of being elite in the NFL, the JJ Watts, the Aaron Rodgerses, now Patrick Mahomes, who I think many people see, you included and myself, as a transcendent player. He's a player that I think justifies this type of investment without question. How does this then, as we kind of shift gears, we're still talking about the quarterback landscape of the NFL. We've waited and waited and waited. to hear something from the Dak Prescott camp coming out of Dallas. They're playing this game in the media. They're playing the game with the personnel department. Dak Prescott very clearly thinks he's worth more than the tender he signed, but he was kind of strong-armed into having to do that very recently. And now Patrick Mahomes literally resets the market and turns it on its ear. How are you feeling if you're Jerry Jones and the Cowboys in terms of your personnel decision to play a quarterback like Prescott, who may not have the similar type of talent as a Patrick Mahomes? He's proven himself. Is he worth the investment of a potential market-setting contract?
I would say that if I'm Dak Prescott, I feel fantastic today. All the eggs are in his basket now. His waiting, and he did sign his franchise tender, but he's in a great spot because, like you said, Patrick Mahomes reset the market. Dak looking for 5 years at $40 million a year doesn't look real crazy anymore. And I think Jerry Jones is sitting there going, man, I should have just signed this guy for 5 years, $40 million a year with a nice guarantee and be done with it. So, you can say Dak is not at the level of Patrick Mahomes, and he's obviously not. He hasn't won a Super Bowl. He doesn't have his greatest stats, but Dak Prescott also hasn't had the benefit of having Andy Reid and Eric Bieniemy working with him on the offensive side, and he hasn't had the benefit of some of the tools that Patrick Mahomes has around him. So I think those are two big things that not to take away from what Patrick Mahomes has done, but he also has had the luxury of having two great offensive minds helping guide him and train him and get him going with NFL football and making sure that their schemes are good. And he's had some really good players around him, Tyreek Hills and the running backs and Sammy Watkins and Kelsey and a great offensive line. So Dak hasn't had all those tools and things along those lines. So I definitely am a big fan of Dak Prescott. I'm super excited. We're going to get to what's going to happen this season, but I'm super excited to see what Mike McCarthy brings to Dak Prescott. I'm a huge Mike McCarthy fan, have been for a really long time, but I think that Dak Prescott's about to enter that upper echelon, elite level quarterbacking. He's right on the fringe right now, and Jerry Jones is probably going to end up paying a lot more for him for his services here in the future than if he just would have signed him 3 or 4 weeks ago at what he was asking for.
Yeah, I completely agree. I also like the potential, as you know, being a homegrown Green Bay Packer fan and having experienced a lot of amazing memories with Mike McCarthy and seeing his offense evolve and having that play into Aaron Rodgers' hands in terms of his pure ability. Let's play a little game called You Would or You Wouldn't in terms of your starting quarterback. If you're building a team right now, the only person that's not available is Patrick Mahomes, financially speaking. Would you take Dak Prescott as your starting quarterback to build a franchise around? Would you or wouldn't you?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely would. If you're talking about who's in the conversation, right? Dak is in that conversation with Deshaun Watson, with Carson Wentz, with Lamar Jackson. Those are the guys who are definitely in the conversation. But if I had to pick any of those guys, I'm a Dak Prescott fan. I have been for the last few years. I think Dak Prescott does a lot of things that successful NFL quarterbacks do, and I think that's shown in his success in the last few years with the Cowboys. So I'm definitely a fan of Dak Prescott, and I think he's gonna. Again, he's probably sitting at home really excited and happy that Patrick Mahomes just made him worth more than he was even worth before.
Yeah, he definitely, hopefully, texted Patrick Mahomes and said, "Attaboy, Patrick, thanks for working it out." Staying on the same lines of would you or wouldn't you, Drew Lock from the Denver Broncos, going to come into his second year as a starter under John Elway, has the tools physically to make some of the throws in that offense there in Denver. Is he a guy you look at as maybe potentially being a predecessor to a Dak Prescott type of passer?
Yeah, I think they are. They actually do have similar passing styles. They're both pretty accurate guys. They don't have super big arm, but they have an arm big enough to make all the throws, and they have quick release, right? So I think Drew Lock is a little bit of an unknown. Had a nice finish to the season last year. Definitely in the driver's seat, but Denver hasn't exactly put together the greatest quarterback play since Peyton Manning left. So we're interested. I'm interested to see when Drew Lock comes through with a whole offseason of defensive coordinators watching all his film. That usually is what changes guys. You see a lot of guys that come out right away as rookies or their first time starting, and they have a lot of success. And then once the defensive coordinators get 3 or 4 or 5 weeks worth of film, things start changing, right? So Drew Lock only started that last half of the season. Denver was pretty much out of it, so you don't know how much teams were really diving in on that. But going into a new season, I think all of his weaknesses will be accentuated by the great defensive coordinators in the NFL and defensive staffs. And we'll truly see if he's able to continue building, or if he becomes another one of those guys that just was quite good enough and wasn't great enough to get into that upper echelon.
Sticking along the same lines, talking a little bit now about the veteran quarterback presence, contracts aside, if you're building a team that's competitive enough, maybe he's had some experience in the playoffs, we have a defense that could potentially, alter the shift of some games, play in some colder weather. Are you going with Russell Wilson from the Seattle Seahawks, or are you going with Aaron Rodgers from the Green Bay Packers? This is strictly based on scheme and setup and where they are in terms of their pedigree as starters.
I think that's a unique question. It's a tough question, right? So Aaron Rodgers is just at that last fringe stage, right? A few more years of being a great quarterback, upper echelon quarterback. Russell Wilson's right in the prime of that. So Russell Wilson's been able to accomplish some fantastic things in Seattle. You've already seen him go from, just a little bit of a game manager when they were making those Super Bowl runs, make the big throw when he needs to where the last few years he's been holding that whole offense on his back. With a lot of receivers that nobody outside of Seattle or hardcore NFL fans really know who they are, right? So, DK Metcalf is in play to have a big year as a second-year guy, but it's a toss-up, right? So Aaron Rodgers still probably is the most talented physical quarterback in the NFL. He's kind of going through that change now of not being the guy carrying the offense on his back. So I guess if you're telling me I have to win a Super Bowl next year and I have the same guys on both ends, I'm probably taking Russell Wilson because he can hold it on your back a little bit more without knowing the specifics of who the wideouts are, who the offensive line is, what kind of offense they're going to run. Russell Wilson's still at a point where he can carry a team on his back as a quarterback. And I think Aaron Rodgers is just kind of past that point where he really needs to have better weapons around him and kind of let the offense kind of flow through him, which is what the Packers are trying to do with Matt LaFleur and the new system he's bringing in.
So, talking a little bit along those lines, rookie-friendly contracts, other quarterbacks in the AFC. Do you like Sam Darnold from the New York Jets or Baker Mayfield from the Cleveland Browns? Similar situations in terms of contract situation, and also from a personnel perspective, I think you'd have to, on paper at least, lean a little bit towards Baker Mayfield as having the better selection of weapons. If you're building an offense and those are the two players available to you, which one are you going to roll with the dice there on that?
I think it's that one's another tough one for me. I'm a big Baker Mayfield fan, and partially because I'm a big, been an Oklahoma Sooners fan since the '80s with Barry Switzer and Brian Bosworth, and watching them win Orange Bowls in the 1980s. But
Right.
I knew Baker when he was, just starting out at Oklahoma when he first transferred there, and saw him do all kinds of great things there. So I'm a big Baker Mayfield fan. I think definitely has better talent around him. Sam Darnold's a talented quarterback. I wasn't high on Sam Darnold coming out of USC, to be honest. I thought he was kind of inaccurate, has a long motion, threw a lot of interceptions in college. Those interceptions aren't necessarily the biggest sticking point of in college. There's a lot of great quarterbacks who had a lot of interceptions in college, but I thought his long motion was something that you don't see a lot of guys in the NFL with long motions who have success. Really, the only one I could think of in the last 10, 15 years is Phillip Rivers. Most of the guys with longer motions don't make it because they have to have that much more anticipation. But I'm a big Baker Mayfield guy. I'm hard on Sam Darnold because I also don't think Adam Gase is much of a head coach. I think he was a decent coordinator, right, when he was working with Peyton Manning. Got a little bit out of Jay Cutler, but his time in Miami and his time in New York has been a little bit, to what we can say, not great. So I'm not a huge fan of what he's doing. So it's hard to get a full reading on what Sam Darnold's doing with New York Jets or where he's going to go if Adam Gase is still his head coach and coordinator.
Yeah, I think Gase is obviously the sort of the wild card in that situation. Offensively, Le'Veon Bell looked a step slow and a little bit late in some of his progressions. Didn't pick up the blitz very well last year. Had some issues with some lingering injuries. Maybe has hit that proverbial wall of running backs that they do when they're in that 28 to 29, 30-year-old range. Obviously, Bell is a specimen physically, but I would agree with you. I would, if I had, if I were pressed and had limited options and the salary cap was not an issue, I would also roll the dice on Baker Mayfield, who I think is going to have a resurgent season in Cleveland, utilizing a number of weapons. Speaking of Cleveland, we'll keep the theme here along the lake in Lake Erie in the Great Lakes. We'll talk a little bit now about David Njoku, who is himself a specimen at tight end. Dave, he's only 23 years old, slated to turn 24 at the latter stages of the upcoming season if we do play one. Big guy, 6'4", 235 pounds, runs a 4.4 40. hasn't been able to fully put it together, partially due to injury concerns, partially due to scheme fit. Where do we see David Njoku, who is on a Cleveland Browns team now that has a number of productive players at tight end? Where do we see him potentially fitting in? Does he stay in Cleveland as part of those 21 personnel packages, which is 2 tight ends, 2 wide receivers, and 1 running back, and how they're going to utilize him in that scheme, which Stefaniak did?
I don't think we see him in Cleveland, right? So they invested a lot in Austin Hooper. Gave him a big contract, right? You can claim that maybe he's not as athletic as David Njoku, but he's put up the stats. He had a great couple of years for Atlanta, and they didn't sign him to be the number 2 guy with that kind of money at a tight end. So they signed him to come in and be number 1, and Njoku becomes the second guy. He may very well get a lot of work as the second tight end, running those 21 packages and things like that. But I don't think that's what he wants to do, right? So you can look at Njoku and be like, okay, he's only been in the league for 2 years. Last year, anybody who played for the Browns is kind of throw that whole year out. The Freddie Kitchens experiment blew up in their face, right? So it's tough to judge him on that year. His rookie year, he had a solid rookie year for a tight end. He's a guy who has all the measurables, has all the talent physically, and he's a guy that would probably get a lot of play in the market. And I know there's a lot of teams looking for that kind of stretch the field tight end. There's a team here in Wisconsin that hasn't had a stretch the field tight end since Michael Finley. So there's been a lot of Packer fans, thinking they might have a shot at getting Njoku. But I don't think he stays with Cleveland. I definitely think he's going to warrant some decent draft capital to bring him on. So, but I do think that there's a lot of teams that are willing to throw that out there and see what they can get for him.
Yeah, I agree. I think the interesting dynamic here with Cleveland is on paper, who are you going to defend in that scheme when you've got Jarvis Landry and Odell Beckham and Austin Hooper and David Njoku, and we haven't even talked about the tailbacks, Kareem Hunt, who's great in the passing game, and when you split him out wide and get him in space, and Nick Chubb, who's a 1,400-yard rusher. We talk about usage, right? There's only so much slices of the pie to go around. What's the biggest challenge then for you if you're the offensive coordinator, as you've been in your professional and college, high school career as a coach, in utilizing players along the caliber of guys who are going to say, okay, on paper, this is a guy that's going to tilt the field one way or the other? Do you see Njoku as fitting that mold?
Yeah, I definitely think he fits the mold of the versatile tight end, right? A guy who he's big enough to inline block. He can do some of the motions. He can definitely dominate a safety or linebacker from a physical capability, both with size and with speed. If you flex him out on a corner, it's a big matchup problem because of his size. So he checks all the boxes that you want in this new age tight end, in the Kelsey mold, the George Kittle mold, right? So he fits all those boxes very well. And again, you would have thought that he would have took more steps last year after a pretty decent rookie year. But again, with the Browns, with what happened to them last year, with the Freddie Kitchens and how big of a mess that was for Cleveland last year, it's almost like that season didn't happen, and this becomes his second year, right? So it's something that, from a tight end's perspective, you generally don't see tight ends blow it out of the gate as rookies very often. Not everybody is a Rob Gronkowski, right? Even look at George Kittle and Kelsey, probably the 2 best tight ends in the league right now. Nobody knew who they were coming out of college and their first couple of years. It wasn't until they got in the system, got comfortable, that they kind of broke out. So I think that David Njoku is a guy that a lot of teams should be taking a look at, because Cleveland is not going to be a place for him anymore.
Would you give up a first-round draft pick if you were in a personnel decision-making position on a roster now, and you could say, hey, this is a player that has shown us he can perform. He does have 93 total catches. I would agree his second season to me is a little bit of a wash medically. Let's give him a red shirt, we'll call it. Are you thinking he's a first-round caliber guy, given that tight end can be one of those positions that's kind of hard to grade coming into the pros? Would you surrender a high pick for him in the lottery?
Yeah, I don't think you're going to see him getting moved for a first round pick. If it's just not really how the NFL works, right? They're not teams are first round draft picks are gold to NFL teams, even first and second round draft picks. So where does he fall in? If you got a guy who's really really good, you're more than likely going to get a third round draft pick for him, right? It's not like Aaron Rodgers going on the market or Dak Prescott's going on the market. That might warrant a first round pick, but a guy like David Njoku, highly guy who's got a lot of potential that has been unfulfilled, is probably max getting a third round pick, more than likely somewhere even in like a fifth round pick, maybe a fifth round and a seventh round, or a fifth round and some other player that can fill a backup role for a team, linebacker or something along those lines. But it's definitely, he's not going to get a ton of play as far as the high draft picks. At least I don't think, because if you look at NFL history, it's just not something that's done regularly.
So you're not giving up a first round pick. You're not going to give up a day 2 pick early in the round, maybe a second rounder. Third round pick potentially is in the cards. Definitely something in the middle of day 3, maybe a fourth or a fifth rounder, maybe a player that's maybe not lived up to the hype, maybe a defender potentially. That being said, where would we see a David Njoku, all things considered equal? I think Dallas is probably out of the equation, just given the amount of contracts that they have to figure out with Amari Cooper now being signed to a max deal. Jamal Adams, the disgruntled safety from the New York Jets, who's going to cost a boatload of money. Dak Prescott's contract is brewing on one of the back burners there in Dallas. I don't think he's a fit for the Cowboys, although schematically it could potentially be a nice fit with Mike McCarthy, who likes to use his tight ends in that fashion. Where do we see David Njoku going in terms of his landing spot if 2020 is on the books?
I think probably I would say there's 3 teams that would most likely be heavily involved in at least talking to him, right? And a lot of times we don't know the behind the scenes of what teams talk to people for different things, but us being in Wisconsin, I think the Packers will make that phone call or have made that phone call. They let Jimmy Graham walk. They have Jay Sternberger, but he's coming into his second year. Didn't have great statistics. He's an unknown. Could be a great player, but he's an unknown. But didn't have the same kind of draft cloud coming out as a David Njoku did. So I think the Packers make that call. I think the New England Patriots make that call. Throughout the history of Bill Belichick, he's been a big fan of the tight end. So I definitely think with Cam Newton there now, Cam Newton's a fan of throwing to tight ends. If he's a starter, if Jarrett Stidham's a starter, and you have a young guy, having a nice tight end in the middle of the field for some of those easy throws and check down throws is great for a young quarterback. So I think that the Patriots are somebody that would make a call and see. He's still in a rookie contract. They don't have a ton of cap room, but when he's still under a rookie contract, they can probably swing that. And another team I think you should take a look at is the Miami Dolphins. Big hole at tight end, need a tight end, have tons of cap room and tons of draft capital. And I think the Dolphins are one of those teams that are pigeonholed or spearheaded here to have a big bounce back year. They drafted really well, signed some guys, and they're due to have a really, kind of a big comeback year. Are they going to make the playoffs this year? I don't know, but they're definitely going to be much more consistently in games, I think. We'll kind of see how fast, what their quarterback situation looks like, right? But again, another team that has Fitzpatrick holding down the fort, keeping it warm until Tua is ready to go. And again, another young quarterback. It's nice to have a tight end outlet when you have a young quarterback just starting out.
Yeah, you said the magic words in that whole recipe, which is draft capital. And obviously Cleveland has done their diligence around making sure they have some picks early in the first rounds of some of the last recent drafts. I think David Njoku has a very strong chance to end up staying in the AFC East, opposing the Miami Dolphins with the New York Jets. So they have the cap room as well.
Possibility too. Again, young quarterback.
Yep.
Adam Gase hasn't been great with tight ends either. So he hasn't been great with a lot of offensive positions in his head coaching career. But again, when you have a young quarterback, having a solid tight end as an outlet really helps their development. It's been proven for pretty much as long as the NFL has been kind of molded towards a passing game in the 80s, right? Having that tight end to be check downs, to work the middle of the field, to take advantage of matchup situations with an athletic tight end on a strong, maybe not as athletic, strong safety or a linebacker, makes life really easy for a young quarterback.
What's the advantage, Dave, as a coordinator's perspective here on Double Coverage Radio, of having a tight end that can split the seam and run down the center of the field and draw attention in that secondary? How critical is that for offenses that are on the move in the new look NFL?
I think it's critical on a couple of points, right? So the first thing is, as a coordinator, you're always looking for matchups, right? And a lot of people think it's one-on-one matchups, right? Like, I got Randy Moss, I'm just going to run him deep on the corner and he's better than him. It's not necessarily – NFL's always at some point becomes a one-on-one matchup, but you're looking at matchups from different personnel. So you talked about 21 personnel, and if I bring in my 21 personnel, and are they going to bring in a little bit of a heavier run stopping package? Are they going to keep 3 linebackers on the field versus my 21? And then if you have a tight end that can get in that 21 personnel, put 2 tight ends on one side and be a power running kind of formation, but still be an athletic enough guy to get out there and beat a strong safety, that gives the offense tons of flexibility and puts a lot of strain on the defense. Because then you're looking at a defense going, okay, they bring in 21. Both their tight ends can run a little bit. If we play a nickel package or we play 5 DBs, they're going to pound us. If we keep our 3 linebackers in or our 4 linebackers in, depending on their front, they're going to try to throw this tight end over the safety, and our safety can't run with them, right? So right now, especially with the way the NFL is going with the offenses that, the Matt LaFleur's, the Sean McVays, that Zach Taylor, those kind of guys going through, having that flexibility of a tweener tight end, a guy that can do a couple different things, and having 2 of those guys really is what people want to have, right? Having 2 of those guys is something that makes offenses that much more flexible and that much more dangerous.
Yeah, I think the tight end for a lot of offenses in the new look NFL, where you're geared towards stretching the field and opening up some of those passing lanes, is really, really critical. I think Njoku has some really good opportunities ahead of him, regardless if Cleveland keeps him on the roster and utilizes in some of those 2 tight end packages, right? He's going to have an opportunity to land somewhere as an unrestricted free agent in one more season. So should be interesting to see how that plays out. We'll switch gears here and keep it in the NFC with a pass rusher we've talked about on last week's show. But before we do that, don't forget to check out Double Coverage Radio on the World Wide Web at doublecoverageradio.com. We're available on Instagram, our YouTube page, which just premiered, and Twitter, as well as all other social media channels. And we're available live streaming on Facebook. He is Dave Mogensen. I am Travis Pipes. You are watching our Tuesday night State of the NFL. Let's talk about the other side of the football and a premier player that's still on the free agent market. Jadeveon Clowney, this guy on paper, if you were to take his name off, do a little whiteout strip on that spreadsheet and look at his measurables and where he factors into some of those defenses on the edge, getting after the quarterback. How in the world is this guy still a free agent? And is there been any interest from him around the league, Dave?
Yeah, and we talked a little bit about Clowney last week, and he's had plenty of interest. He seems to be holding out for a number that he thinks he's worth, and he hasn't hit that number yet. So I think the interesting thing now is the longer he stays out, the more teams that might not have the kind of funds that he wants as far as cap room and stuff start getting into the picture. So I think what we saw the last couple of days is the Las Vegas Raiders. Got to go call them the Las Vegas Raiders now, right? The Las Vegas Raiders have kind of thrown their name in the hat and per reports have offered him a contract. It's again not at the number that he wants to be at, but as his contract numbers and offers come in well lower than what he wants, at some point he's either going to say, I'm not going to play, or I'm going to take one of these deals, maybe a 1 or 2 year deal with somebody and try to go out and get a big contract down the road. Again, we talked about the fact that Clowney has all the measurables. He's a freak athlete. He's done some freakish things in the NFL, but he's never strung together like that game-breaking, you drop the J.J. Watt or, game-breaking defensive difference maker kind of season and throughout his career. He's shown flashes, so he's still kind of waiting for that, which I think is why teams are hesitant to pay him that $20 million a year. They haven't seen him be the huge, giant difference maker that would warrant a $20 million plus a year contract as a pass rusher.
Yeah, he thinks he's Bruce Smith, but in fact, he's not Bruce Smith. And I would argue that financially speaking, he's probably not justifiably going to see anywhere near $20 million guaranteed. How well has it worked out now for players of his caliber to say, hey, I'm going to bank on myself. I'm going to take a season off. We've seen other players at different positions on offense do it. Could a defensive lineman have a little bit of an advantage in terms of wear and tear if he decides to say, hey, I'm going to sit out this season and try again at another shake, especially given the uncertainty of the landscape of the NFL and maybe not having as much pressure with an unknown draft class that's coming in and other free agency, questions? Or would it be in his best interest to take the deal with the Raiders and move on?
I think this year it's unique, right? We don't even know if there's going to be a season. We don't know if it's going to be if there is a season, if it's going to be a full season, if it's going to be partial season. We have no idea. We don't know what the heck's going on, what's going to happen. So I think it's unique. Again, we talked about last week that he's probably got some cash, right? He's had some good contracts. He's had some bigger contracts. He's not shouldn't be hurting for money. So it's not something where he needs to get out and sign a contract so he gets a signing bonus before the season gets canceled or shortened and he loses some money, right? So I think that's possibly playing in his mind too, right? Like, what I'm not. Why do I have to go? Nobody's even going to camp. We don't know what's happening. Why should I be in a rush to sign a contract when I don't even know if there's going to be a season? So, he can play the part of wait until training camp. And you see a lot of guys will just wait till training camp's over so they can sign their contract, get their signing bonus, and skip all of training camp, right? So I'm sure that's also in the front of his mind that, hey, I don't need training camp. I know what I'm doing. Give me a contract, send me the playbook. And as soon as the last day of training camp's over, I'll sign my contract and I'll show up and get ready to go for the first game.
Yeah, I need to run by the bank real quick to just deposit this check before I report to camp
Is
and
that a
do
big
my.
check?
Yeah, it's going to be one of those big checks like Publishers Clearinghouse with the name of Jadeveon Clowney,
Make
which
sure you
in
take it to a big bank.
right, yeah, and I would say that the Las Vegas would be one of the parts of the world where they have the capability to write all sorts of big checks. I wonder if John Gruden and General Manager Mike Mayock be interested in potentially adding them to that rotation with Cleveland Farrell, who's a pretty decent rusher there on the edge as well. Um, the other thing with him is if you're a defensive coordinator, you're putting yourself into a position to get a premier edge rusher, a guy you're going to look at for potentially, anywhere from 9 to 13, give or take, sacks a season. Maybe can do a decent job of setting the edge in the run game. Is he a player that you're going to pay top dollar to when you could work out of a rotation? What's the benefit of having 3 or 4 guys on the edge who can play the same position and you rotate them in based on out of sub package alignments?
I think the benefit is that you have to ask yourself the question: is Jadeveon Clowney at 60 to 70% of his max? When he's tired, is he better than a guy who is at 100% of his max endurance? In the third quarter or the fourth quarter, right? If I have 3 guys who maybe collectively are 75% the player that Jadeveon Clowney is, but I can keep them all in fresh. So how far does his play go down when he's tired? And there's guys who are special players, and you look at some of the best defensive players in the league, and you look at some of those guys, from J.J. Watt or Darius Smith, and some of these guys that have proven they can play throughout the game consistently, and they play at a high level, right? But something you have to kind of weigh at is: do I take three lesser guys fully at 100% at all times as good or better than one guy for a lot of money who's going to be playing a lot of the game at not as full endurance because he's playing so many snaps?
Did Bill O'Brien see something that we didn't in not offering him a contract as an outside linebacker? Clearly, the variables are a little bit different in terms of the structure of those contracts and saying, hey, we're going to spend 18 to $40 million less over the life of the contract by playing him sort of surreptitiously there on the front of the edge of that defensive line. How smart is Bill O'Brien for taking a pass?
I think Bill O'Brien played that saying, okay, I got Watt. I have a guy who's proven to be a difference maker, albeit on the downside of his career, but he's proven to be a difference maker game in and game out, season in and season out. So I have that guy already. I'm paying him big money. Can I afford to pay 2 guys that kind of money? Especially when Clowney, they were kind of running that, they're running that 3-4. Clowney can do it, but I still think having his hand on the ground is where he's most natural. So do I think about paying that guy the same amount of money I'm paying J.J. Watt? And I think that was an easy decision for him, saying, no, I can't afford to blow my salary cap up on 2 defensive linemen, paying them that kind of money. So, Bill O'Brien took a lot of crap for that. I don't think there's anywhere close to some of the stuff that he's done recently this offseason, but I think letting him walk was probably a smart move, getting a draft pick for him and not paying him the huge contract and kind of blowing up his salary cap on 2 defensive players,
Yeah,
especially when they got Deshaun Watson coming up for a refill here this year, next year.
coming up for a refill, we'll talk about Deshaun Watson and the state of the landscape in the AFC South on a future episode. It's interesting that we talk about coming up for a refill. as it applies to players that are, of his caliber. You could say, hey, he's definitely a difference maker. There's not any uncertainty about his ability to contribute and shift the game in spurts. But the reality is he's not a high motor guy to me that sets the edge, that does the little things, gets after the quarterback, and sort of represents that total picture when it comes to a game wrecking defensive end. I'd rather have a JJ Watt at the current place in his career than I would a Jadeveon Clowney. Bottom line, does he get signed this offseason, or is he a street free agent until 2021? What's your general sentiment on that?
I think if the season happens, he'll be signed. I do think he's just holding out, waiting for the best deal. There's going to come to the point where if the season does go on, in the middle to end of training camp, he's going to be like, all right, I want to get my money. So he's going to sign for somebody. And even if it's just a 1 year deal or a show me deal, I'll sign for somewhere for 10, 12 million bucks, try to have a good season and go next year to get my big contract. Right. So I definitely think if there is a season, Jadeveon Clowney will bite the bullet, figure out where his best chance to have a big year is, and go sign there.
Yeah, I agree. I think Jadeveon Clowney would be interesting to see him play for the Raiders. They have some up and coming talents on that defensive line in that rotation. So we'll see if we have some breaking news related to his signing somewhere as the beginning of training camp approaches, which Dave, July 21st, which is just a shade over 2 weeks away. Rookies are set to report to NFL training camps. We're going to take a little bit of a break from the ticker news here and talk a little bit about the state of training camp. How are we feeling about reporting to camp? What's the current landscape in terms of teams saying, yes, we're going to be available to have our facilities open? Hey, if I'm Dallas, Jerry Jones is not having his team playing in Oxnard, California and having joint practices. How soon are we getting to sort of the witching hour, whether or not this season happens? And what's your feeling around things being not delayed or happening on time?
Every week more things come out, more things happen that just keep pushing me towards this zone where I struggle to see how we're going to have a season period, an NFL season or an NCAA football season period, let alone starting on time. Right? I think it's a foregone conclusion. The NFL's going to wait till the very last possible second to announce it. There's no way they're letting people in training camps in 2 weeks. It's just not happening. Right now, Major League Baseball and NBA may not even start on time. They're having people coming down with the virus left and right over and over. Testing's a problem in Major League Baseball. So, even in we looked at here in Wisconsin, the Bucks closed down their facility last week. They're getting ready to leave for Orlando, and we don't know who it is, but they have multiple people testing positive. So I think right now, if the NFL starts, if there's a place to place a bet on that, if there's a prop bet somewhere, it's got to be a 10,000 to 1 that the NFL starts training camp on time. They already canceled 2 preseason games. NFLPA is talking about we don't want any preseason games, right? We don't want to put anybody in any more risk to contract the virus than they absolutely need. There's pictures going around of these new age crazy helmets. I don't know if those are even real or not. They look cool. They're talking about mandatory visors. There's all kinds of things getting banted around. If you look at NCAA, you have college presidents, governors saying, "Listen, we don't even know if students are going to be back on campus. How the heck are we going to talk about playing football?" There's been numerous Division II, Division III, and NAIA conferences that have canceled their seasons already. Minnesota Junior College Conference canceled their fall sports season already. So there's a lot of things happening that make me think that NFL fall season is not going to happen, at least as we know it.
I just checked Barstool Sports and the Caesars Sportsbook via Penn Gaming. Odds for the NFL season to kick off on their slated day of weekend of September 7th, plus 2,500. That is definitely an underdog pitch if you were to take one right now. So doesn't bode well for the potential forecast of the future. Speaking of training camps, we're going to be talking about some rookies that are going to be reporting in Green Bay if the season kicks off at that rookie camp in just over 2 weeks. A.J. Dillon, running back for the Packers, and Jordan Love, quarterback from Utah State, their first-round draft pick. Should be interesting to see how both of these players get set up in the offseason. Jordan Love reportedly moving into his new place, his new digs in Titletown, and within the last week. And AJ Dillon, who signed his contract about 10 days ago, has been there working out. What do we know about AJ Dillon and Jordan Love and this burdening bromance that's currently happening for the Green Bay Packers?
Yeah, I think from Packer fans, it's pretty cool, right? So AJ Dillon's been in Green Bay since the draft, right? Like the week after the draft, he moved to Green Bay. There's a great facility in Green Bay called Synergy Sports that a lot of Packers work out. A lot of guys work out there, professional athletes and stuff, and the public can work out there too. So there's a chance to kind of see those guys doing their work. But AJ Dillon's been there doing working out with those guys, and doing whatever the Packers want to do as far as workouts. But it's pretty cool that just about a little over a week ago, Jordan Love came, signed his contract in Green Bay, and he's there working out with AJ Dillon too. Allen Lazard's still in Green Bay; he's working out there as well. So, from a Packer fan perspective, it's got to be pretty cool that your top 2 draft picks are there, kind of getting to know each other, working out. The top young receiver that the Packers have right now, Allen Lazard's there working out with them too. So, as much as Wisconsin people and Packer fans are dreading thinking about life after Aaron Rodgers, if you want to continue having successful NFL seasons out of the Green Bay Packers, having this core of guys kind of working together, getting to know each other, learning about each other, is something that's super beneficial to the Packers organization and to those guys' future NFL careers.
Should be exciting for Packer fans who are gassing up on their lunch break at Quick Trip on Lombardi Avenue to check out AJ Dillon, maybe grabbing something from the dollar rack. Love that they're in town at Synergy, which we know is an outstanding facility for pro style and major college athletes to train at right there in Green Bay. How important is it, Dave, that being said, with your background as a coordinator, getting in the playbook early as possible in terms of getting prepared for the season and building chemistry and building rapport as a young player that's coming into the NFL, where clearly there's going to be some differences in terms of the speed of the game, how you process the game in terms of both of them being on offense. How invaluable is it that they're in the same room, whether it's at the facility or at their hotel or at their apartment, just getting into the playbook and learning?
I think getting into the playbook is something that has to be done as soon as you possibly can, and that's why NFL teams have that rookie camp the weekend after the draft or within 2 weeks, right? Normally. So we had Antoine Burns on our Wisconsin Prep to the Pro series, and he talked a lot about his first training camp when he was with the Cleveland Browns, and the biggest, hardest thing to pick up was the playbook, right? So there's kind of still two trending things. So there's that old school NFL playbook. If you think of like John Gruden, right? And you ever watched any of the John Gruden stuff on the Hard Knocks or things like that, you get those play calls that are like our ticker down here. It's just like miles long. But,
full of information that's hard to break down at any point. Very confusing.
But everybody talks about, like even Antoine talked about, I just got to figure out what my code words, right? So Viper means this to me, it means nothing to the offensive lineman, and Delta means this to me, it means nothing to the running backs. Quarterback has to know what every single word means, right? So for Jordan Love, he might be coming from a college playbook that might be more of something that's a little easier to digest. A lot of college teams are not running that pro style lingo. They're getting to the shorter lingo. That's kind of the new age of offense, right? Less verbiage. Let's let him play and be fast, right? So he's probably coming from something similar to that, and then he's going to walk into the door and get a play call that's 18 words long, and maybe 3 words speak to the wideouts, and 4 words speak to the O line, and 3 words speak to the running back, and these other 2 to the tight end, and this one tells you the formation, that one tells you the snap count. Jordan Love's got to know what every one of those 18 words means and understand what each guy's movement is on that, understand the protection, right? So from a quarterback perspective, it's even more difficult than it is for a regular position. Eventually, right, you want your wide receiver to hear a play call and know what it means to everybody, eventually, right? But a rookie wide receiver can come in and say, hey, Viper and Delta, if you hear that in this play call, that means this to you. Everything else, forget about it until they learn it. So it's simpler for them to learn what their code words are and what speaks to them initially. But quarterbacks don't have that luxury, and that's something that they have to kind of learn all of it. So get in the playbook as soon as you possibly can. Having another rookie in there to help digest, having Allen Lazard there, who has been in the system for a year, to kind of help digest too, are super invaluable, especially since you can't get in the facilities and talk to any coaches.
That being said, as we talked a little bit about the structure of the language of play calling and your experience as an offensive coordinator at various levels, from prep football all the way to the professional indoor leagues, how important is it to understand the language component of what the play structure is? Is there a big disparity in this case between the playbook that he's currently breaking down with Matt LaFleur and what he saw at Utah State?
From a verbiage standpoint, yeah, probably. So I think the biggest difference between playbook to playbook and any, from high school all the way up to college to professional levels is really the verbiage. A lot of the stuff is the same, right? A slant's a slant, a dig is a dig, a power is a power. A basic 5-man cup protection is the same, or a fan protection is the same. But it's what we call it, what each team calls it. Because if you want to check at the line of scrimmage, you can't just say, hey, I want you to check to a slant, right? Because every defense knows it's going to come up. So everybody has words of what stuff means, whether they operate on passing trees and numbers or concepts and words or a combination of both, and how their run game, do they have holes? Do they have just general directions? A lot of zone teams, you might think of old school football, they're going to run 24 power, the 2 back to the 4 hole with the pulling guard, right? A lot of zone teams just have a way to call right and a way to call left. They don't even have holes because they're not really running to a hole. They're running a zone scheme. So there's kind of different variables, but the biggest difference is understanding what the verbiage means. And coaches learn that from different coaches throughout their time building up. They add their own things, and by the time they're running their own offense, they've gotten 2 or 3 different guys' things in there, plus their own stuff in there. Now you got all these words that mean a million different things. And understanding that, one of the hardest things is when you get, somebody like Tom Brady coming in from New England, being in a very similar system for his whole career, now coming to learn a new system. You even heard Bruce Arians talk about, hey, we're going to take some of the stuff that Tom knows and some of his verbiage, and we're going to bring it into ours, right? And to some degree, but still, it's going to be easier for Tom to learn some new stuff than it is to teach all the Tampa Bay Buccaneers something new. So there'll be a little bit of taking some of the stuff he did and maybe keeping some of it. And then Tom Brady, his biggest thing, which is why he's out there running plays with guys and doing stuff with those guys, is not necessarily to, watch them run slants. Yeah, there's timing involved and things along those lines, but just to say it to each other and understand the verbiage of what things mean.
Spider Y2 banana. Spider Y2 banana. That means we just called to our next segment here, which is the Washington name change. That is the audible. That essentially means we're moving into the discussion around the Washington franchise. We're not going to say their name on air for all the appropriate reasons. How big is this issue in the landscape of the NFL and maybe even in sports? This kind of transcends just the NFL. There's a lot of organizations, Dave, who are going to be facing some challenges around making the decision to rebrand yourself in the interest of solidarity and equality. I know you're personally very steadfast in your beliefs about this kind of stuff. How important is it for Washington owner and general manager Daniel Snyder to make this change yesterday?
I think, this is not something that's new. So a lot of people are up in arms, upset because of, traditions. And this is a big tradition. They've been called this forever, but it's not something new. This has been going on for 30 plus years. I remember when Daniel Snyder first bought the team in the late 90s, they were bringing up that, hey, maybe you should change the name. You just bought it. You're the new owner. Change the name, right? I definitely think it's something it's long overdue. As we progress as a nation, right, things that were acceptable and not really understood change. And we're at a point now where I think we've reached, a tipping point in society where there's things that people have just kind of said, hey, we shouldn't do this, but we told you didn't change it and then it will go away. I don't think these things we're at a point where things are just not going to go away anymore. And I think, the Washington, Cleveland baseball franchise, even Kansas City, are a team that may change, right? So Washington's long overdue. They should have done this. I think the most unfortunate part was Daniel Snyder could have had enough foresight to look at the climate we're in now, know that this has been an issue, and he came out 2 weeks ago and said, hey, guess what? I sat down with my players. I understand this, social injustices and some of the commentary going on, and I think we should change the name of our franchise finally. That would have been a landmark moment for Washington, would have been a landmark moment for the NFL. But again, it's taking all kinds of social pressure and pressure from outside forces to get him to consider to do this. So I definitely think he dropped the ball a little bit there, but coming through, if they actually do go through with the name change, I think it would be dynamic for them. I think they'll sell a ton of merchandise. People will get on board if they have the right name. It could be something that could be really beneficial for a team that's not been very good on the field for a number of years, right? Haven't been very successful, kind of been, through coaches and different things and different, bad things after bad thing after bad thing happening. And Daniel Snyder has not the greatest reputation as an NFL owner, right? So I think that's the biggest thing is there's an opportunity there for them to get some good PR, to do what's right, and maybe hope that helps spearhead them into a new direction.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's definitely an element, and it's kind of unique just given the landscape now that you're in a position like Snyder clearly is, where he could say, hey, this is a great opportunity for us to literally rebrand the franchise at kind of a place where they're coming up for a stadium venture. They're coming up with an opportunity now to change where they currently are playing. Part of it is related to sponsorships, although, as we know, naming rights and sponsorship and different elements of that kind of can change, for the most part overnight. The NFL season's really only 16 games. If you're an organization that has a home team like Washington does, they play one of their away games, usually in Toronto against the Buffalo Bills every couple of years. Revenue-wise, you're only seeing 6 to 8 games a season, maybe 10 if you're playing in the playoffs, maybe hosting a wild card game or a divisional round game. And clearly, the Washington team has not been competitive in recent memories, so it should be kind of interesting. I personally think the name Red Tails is going to be what they're going to go with, which is relevant to the Tuskegee Airmen Air Squadron for World War II, which is a minority World War II veteran combat fighter group based in Washington, D.C. So potentially some great opportunities there. We've asked you what we think your opinion is on Washington's name change and how that pertains to the state of the NFL. Do you think Kansas City is going to go through a similar overhaul enhancement of some of their experiences as it applies to the name Kansas City Chiefs? Or do you see it being a little bit of a different perspective on the same spectrum?
I think I don't know enough about the backgrounds for Kansas City to speak to it. I think it is on a different level, right? It's not as naturally derogatory as Washington's name can be, but it's still something that you want to look at. You look, even in the past 20 to 30 years, University of Illinois changed their mascot. Just here in Wisconsin, the Marquette has not always been the Golden Eagles, right? So they went through a name change in the mid 90s and changed their mascot as well. So I definitely think that Kansas City will get looked at. I think Cleveland MLB franchise will get looked at. Unique, something else unique with Washington is it sounds like Washington has Daniel Snyder's known as the owner, but if with many NFL teams, outside of Dallas with Jerry Jones and maybe Las Vegas, a lot of NFL teams, the owner really just owns the majority of the team, right? In majority of voting power, and they have minority owners. So what it sounds like is that 3 minority owners are trying to get out and trying to sell because of this issue and kind of because of Daniel Snyder. So there's also been some rumblings that it might not be Daniel Snyder making this decision because he might just say he's done with it and get out completely without the support of these minority owners. So one interesting name I've heard kind of being bandied around is somebody that wants to get into the NFL as an owner is Jeff Bezos from Amazon, is somebody that wants to get in as an NFL owner. Sounds like the NFL has been courting him to be an NFL owner, and there may be some pressure on Daniel Snyder to just sell the whole team outright to Jeff Bezos.
Yeah, Jeff Bezos probably has the capability to buy any number of
Probably.
professional sports teams. Must be nice to be wondering what you're doing this weekend and if you're going to buy the Washington NFL franchise, which is a storied franchise and has
Yeah.
a lot of potential and a great fan base based there in the nation's capital. Should be interesting to see where that conversation goes in the coming days and weeks ahead. We are Double Coverage Radio. My name is Travis Pipes. He is Dave Mogensen. We are Elkhorn Area High School alumni, proud alumni. We're coming to you live on Facebook tonight. Thanks for checking us out. As we start to wind down, don't forget to check back to the site, doublecoverageradio.com on the World Wide Web. We are also available on all the social media, YouTube, Twitter, and Instagram for football coverage from the preps to the pros. We will check you out and have an update on a late breaking show on Thursday this week. Should be interesting. We're going to be talking about Wisconsin Wolfpack stories from the road. Maybe give us a little teaser on potentially showing some people what it's like to hop on the bus with your gear bag and hit the road to play some football all over the contiguous 48. What was it like for you coming up with an opportunity to start your coaching experience with the Wisconsin Wolfpack? And how excited are you to talk about what it was like on the road? All the G-rated, PG-rated stories.
Yeah, we'll try to keep it as PG as possible. But I've had the opportunity to coach for 4 different arena football teams. That was actually Wisconsin Wolfpack, which actually my second. I started with the Milwaukee Bone Crushers after they fired Gilbert Brown, and I came in there and we parlayed that. A lot of the same guys who were on that staff parlayed that an opportunity with the Wisconsin Wolfpack out of Madison. And if you've ever seen, if you think of the movie Major League crossed with semi-pro, that was the Wisconsin Wolfpack. So if you enjoy those movies, if you enjoy Major League and you enjoy semi-pro, and you want real life stories that fit into that same mold, that's what we'll be talking about Thursday. Fantastic stories about bus trips and pregame fights and after game festivities and great locker room stories and guys that slept on the couch in the stadium and Vienna beef hot dogs and
Living on Vienna beef and living
I,
on a vending machines 4 months out of the
I,
year.
I
Sounds like a
cannot give
great
it
set of stories.
justice, Travis, but we'll get a couple of guys that were there with me and can give some great perspectives on stuff. We'll try to dig up some funny pictures if we can find them. There might be a couple. There's a couple of videos floating around the internet still too on YouTube of some old videos, but that's definitely stories that I will tell for the rest of my life, and I'm sure that people will enjoy hearing them.
Yeah, we're looking forward to seeing and hearing a little bit more about your experiences coming up in your collegiate and your professional career as an offensive coordinator. Thanks for tuning into Double Coverage tonight. I am Travis Pipes. He's Dave Mogensen. Dave, have a safe rest of your trip down in Fort Lauderdale area in Florida. And as always, thanks for tuning into Double Coverage Radio. We will see you guys